Okay, I want to thank you all for coming out in this rainy, cold night. And we're gonna try to finish up by 8 o'clock. I know it's late, some of you haven't had dinner. So we'll go till then, and if we have to, just go to other meetings. And I want to remind you of the Zoom rules. Make sure you say your name and address so that it gets onto the recording. Excuse me. And we don't have any voting members online, just an observer. We're joined tonight by Rory and Nick from Glendale Development, and Melissa Cody and Jean Christie from Ty and Bond. Okay, we're gonna review the minutes first from the last meeting.
Yeah.
I would just change one line. It's in the third paragraph at the very end, and reminding them to begin in spring. The whole point is that they don't forget to start the test. I wrote it down.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Oh,
Reminding them to begin in spring. We're gonna write and remind Great Horse to start the testing because they forgot this year.
The only question I had on there, is I know we keep saying like Valentine property. Is there like a lot number for that or an address?
Oh, there must be.
Yeah,
I'm just wondering,
yeah, what's the street?
if we could,
South
Yeah.
South Munson, I'm just wondering if we could just add the address to that of whatever it is, just so if you ever have to do like a search in
Yeah,
the
we
future,
should do that.
Yeah,
it'd be there.
If not, the parcel number.
Yeah, something like that, yeah.
yeah.
At least South Munson.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Okay,
Kind of do that more often with a lot of stuff, because then I wouldn't
should
have had
be
to
a
ask the
habit.
question the other day about that
Right.
one on Riverham Road.
Yeah.
okay, any more changes?
No, that's
All in
it.
favor of accepting the minutes?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Okay, I'm gonna open the hearing for 530 Glendale Agri-Solar. PWE 1730238. Glendale Road Development is proposing to construct a commercial, sorry, my voice got to me. A commercial renewable energy facility at 530 Glendale Road, parcels 29160 and 29165. The property is owned R6, and the primary, wasn't in you just saying. The primary development site is 53 acres.
Exciting watching.
Was that?
Somebody's not on mute.
Somebody's not on mute.
Somebody did get it. Oh, there's more people now.
Yeah, but they're all muted.
Oh, okay. The facility would be 4.95 megawatt AC ground mounted solar photovoltaic array with a required electrical equipment, transformer, switch gears, and a lithium ion battery energy storage system. It would be operating in conjunction with Ledge Valley Farm as an agricultural ground mounted solar system, where the interior array field areas would be utilized as pastures for grazing sheep, cattle, and poultry. Most of tonight is going to be taken up with reviewing the peer reviews that we got from Ty and Bond. We have both one of the NOI and one of the stormwater. I'm not sure if we'll reach them all tonight. Depends how much conversation there is. But before we got into that, we're going to be talking a lot about jurisdictional areas and the different laws. So I want to put up that one. Wanted to remind you about what our jurisdiction and sources of guidance are. through DEP. The conservation commissions were created to steward local lands and water under the aegis of DEP, the Department of Environmental Protection, and as liaisons with the Department of Fish and Wildlife through the NHESP program, and with DCR, particularly through forestry and through the state forester. Through DEP, we are tasked with enacting the Wetlands Protection Act, which includes the Riverfront Act, and with incorporating associated regulations such as the 401 Water Quality Act, the land underwater rules of the Army Corps of Engineers, and the local Hampden wetland bylaws. So those are all the rules that we're working under. Mass General Law, Chapter 40 defines the areas subject to protection, and these are the ones relevant to where we are. There's another set for seacoast, bordering vegetated wetlands, stream bank, perennial or intermittent, land under river, pond, or lake, land subject to flooding, and riverfront area, which has a 200-foot corridor, which is also resource area along both sides of a perennial river. Several of the other areas also have a buffer zone, generally 100 feet. So that means there's a resource area, and each resource area is surrounded by a buffer zone. And the resource areas and the buffer zones have different rules. Okay. Okay, you want to show the other diagram?
Escape. There you go.
This illustrates where the different areas are, so you can get some idea. The blue in the middle could be a stream, could be a pond, could be a river. Next to it, there's banks, which usually rise up to hold the river in, or the pond. And next to that, there may be bordering vegetated wetlands, and those are areas where the soil holds a lot of water and where there's certain kinds of vegetation that indicate that it's wet a lot of the time. And the river, or whatever, the river, if that central thing was a river, has a riverfront area of 200 feet, you can see. The bordering vegetated wetlands have a 100-foot buffer that continues out. I think that pretty much covers it.
The isolated.
Yeah, isolated land subject to flooding, we don't have on this property, but it has separate rules and only as a resource area under some conditions. So the ones that pertain to bodies of water and the surrounding things are the more critical for this particular project.
So can I just bring something up for us then? So if we say it's the wetlands where the blue section is with the bank and all that, obviously is in our Hampden bylaws is nothing within the 25 feet from the edge of that, right? And
Oh,
then,
right. We
and
do.
then
I should
anything,
say that.
and then I would say anything outside from the 25 to the 100 doesn't mean something can't be done as long as it's followed within the rules, or possibly nothing can be, depends on the conditions of everything, right?
Right, right. We do have in our Hampden bylaws, we have an extra area that's defined, the no disturb zone, which is in the first 25 feet of a buffer zone essentially, or of the 200 feet riparian area. So that area is especially protected, and we try to keep it completely untouched unless there's a hardship. All right, we're also going to be referring to 310 CMR 10 and all these numbers. All of those are the Commonwealth of Mass regulations that pertain, particularly all the ones under 10 pertain to the wetlands. And DEP policy 17.1, which is their guidance about how to implement the regulations of the solar policies. So those are the things that you'll hear talking about in all of this discussion, because tonight is reviewing the NOI and reviewing the stormwater report to see if they are complete for having submitted all the information that we need to make a decision. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Melissa and Jean.
Sure. We can flip a coin to see who goes first, but we'll at least introduce ourselves. I'm Jean Christie. I'm a professional civil engineer at Ty and Bond. My focus was the stormwater management design.
I'm Melissa Cody. I am a senior scientist. My focus is the regulatory compliance aspects of the wetlands regs.
So probably we should do the NOI first.
All right. So we provided the commission, we were provided a copy of the notice of intent and the drawings that accompanied it. That in addition to the stormwater report, which was Jean's piece, and our review was provided to the commission on January 23rd. And I believe it's included in the packet the commission has available to everyone here. Great.
Bree, do you have a map you can just pop up there so people have it to look at?
Certainly. I was just sending one person a link, but yes, I'll do that right now.
Okay,
Okay, they don't-
sorry, it's okay.
Would you mind allowing me to share, please?
Sure, hold on.
I just want to get a map up there so you can see what people are talking about.
Okay, I forgot how to do that. Remember?
Share it.
Yeah, I know.
Can he just share it from his screen and you accept it?
Click on. The list.
That do it?
Anybody want to help me?
And if you right click on my name, does that give you like permission to allow me to share?
Or use those three dots.
Yeah,
No.
click.
Oh, wait a minute, yeah, hold on. Got there.
Be host. You can make a host and he can share. You change that.
We've had an operator, I haven't done this in a while, so I forgot.
Now you can share.
I think he can share.
Ah, okay.
So would you just like to go through number by bullet by bullet?
Yes.
Okay. And the first comment essentially is that these are in addition to the comments that DEP provided in their file number notification letter.
Okay, we're going to be talking about one that looks like this in the packet. It's got Ty and Bond up in the corner,
There's peer review.
and it says
NOI.
peer review under it, notice of intent. And the DEP comments she's talking about look like this. They should be right behind it,
No, they're in front of it. That's the first.
in front of it. Okay.
So our first comment, based on the materials we provided, that we were provided, the actual WPA Form 3 that was included didn't have signature on it. So we recommend the commission get a copy for the
I
sign.
don't know if that's true.
Great. All right. The second comment under the bylaw is that the proof of confirmation or confirmation of coordination with other boards is required per section 7. And if that was done, the bylaw notes that the commission shall not take final action until such boards and officials have had 14 days from date of receipt of the notice to file their comments.
They've had a meeting with the planning board already, which will be continuing just like this one. And, have you talked to Hobie yet? To
Not yet.
The inspector?
No, ma'am, not yet.
So that you need to do that because he contacts you with any of the other water quality things or things that you need.
I'll make sure to do so.
The third comment references the 25-foot no disturb zone that you mentioned in your introduction. And we recommended that the commission request an alternatives analysis of avoiding or further minimizing proposed impacts, including how such avoidance or minimization would present a hardship that the commission could consider under a waiver request. Okay.
Okay, I think that is, we agreed to all the recommendations.
Okay.
We added some comments and added a few items. So did you get my response, their response?
No, ma'am.
It's in here.
Let's pass them up.
This one?
Yeah.
It's in the packet.
Yeah, did you guys pick
Yeah,
up one of these?
did you pick up?
I got one, yeah.
It should be
I
right.
mean, this is the first time I'm seeing it. Yes, I
Ah.
just picked it up.
You got it?
Yeah.
Okay, they have it.
Okay.
Our next comment is to confirm the nature and extent of vegetation clearing to achieve the 16-foot wide gravel driveway width, which is described as clean and defined edges in the narrative, as well as any changes in grade where these activities are proposed within riverfront area and buffer zone.
And we put in extensive extra comments about the road coming in and the width of it. When we reviewed the plans, the latest plans that the planning board has, they only showed 10 feet for the driveway. So it appears unpermitted, at least as far as the planning board files. So we should check and make sure that that's settled with them.
Can we get the side to speak up a little bit? We're having trouble hearing. We
Oh,
can't
okay.
hear her back here at all. We cannot hear her back.
Can we get her a mic? Yeah, let's get.
No, that's gonna help.
That's,
No.
that's coming for the.
These aren't,
Oh,
these aren't
that's
microphones.
I will do
We
my
do
best.
not have microphones, unfortunately.
We can't hear her back this way and she keeps bouncing.
Yeah, okay.
I am reading verbatim from what's in your packet, so that should help a little bit fill in the gaps, I hope. All right, the next comment is to clarify the northern boundary of the BBW south of the existing driveway and extent of the associated 100-foot buffer zone. We included an excerpt from site plan sheet C 2.0, which is the area below the existing structure shown in brown. Next comment, number 6, provide details relative to the construction of the subsurface water storage tank proposed in buffer zone. Refer to excerpt from site plan C-2.0 below. More specifically, the extent of vegetation removal, dimensions of excavation, length, width, depth, so location of soil stockpile or piles, means of post-construction restoration and stabilization. The next comment, 7. Clarification of the extent of underground electric conduit versus overhead electric utilities and alternative designs for the underground electric conduit alignment within riverfront area and buffer zone. We note that the proposed alignment is not limited to the footprint of the gravel access road, and that future maintenance may result in recurring alterations of naturally vegetated areas within the riverfront area. Comment 8. Provide a detailed description of the stockpiles to be removed from in riverfront area, including the age of the stockpiles and nature of the materials, as well as the proposed means of stabilizing the exposed ground in these areas. Number 9, provide concrete and material washout area details, including proposed protective measures. Number 10, submit revised drawings showing the proposed locations of the horizontal directional drill or HDD sending and receiving pit locations as well as conduit string out areas. Number 11, HDD operations may result in frack out and unintended impacts to the landscape above the alignment. At this site, the area is a jurisdictional vegetated wetland. We recommend the commission require HDD slurry pressure monitoring and frack out contingency plans, as well as an emergency wetland restoration plan. Number 12, provide a cross-section and detail of the proposed concrete block retaining walls, including clarification of any proposed footing or foundation. Provide additional clarification of proposed depth of earthwork and anticipated temporary impacts required to construct these features in close proximity to a jurisdictional wetland resource area. Excuse me. Refer to excerpt from site plan C-2.2 below. This is, sorry, 2 lines. Thank you so much.
No problem at all.
2.2 and up at the top. Right there. Okay.
So a little bit.
So thank you. That's the
For this,
area.
we added an extensive comment. We have serious concerns about the proximity of this to the property line and its effect on the homeowner. We're asking for an additional delineation of the area that would be within that 100-foot circumference of the end of the wetlands there. You see that dotted red line? Because we need to know a little more about the stream and what's going under there and what's not. We will obtain permission from the property owner so that you can, that wasn't done because the delineators couldn't really go over there. So it needs to get done. But I would note that it's within the planning board's clearance line, and it's very close to the neighbor. Okay.
Comment 13, provide a narrative addressing the BVW performance standards set forth at 310 CMR 10.554B, as well as documentation of an assessment of the BVW prepared in accordance with the Massachusetts Inland Wetland Replacement Guidelines, second edition, September 2022. Number 14, we recommend the commission require documentation of the modeling and calculations in support of the proposed 24-inch diameter culvert at the proposed wetland crossing. Number 15, on page 2 of 8 of the NOI narrative, the applicant states the site has been designed to mitigate impacts to the East Brook and its adjacent bordering vegetated wetlands and contributing intermittent and perennial streams. We recommend the commission require clarification and quantification of the impacts to these resource areas and the proposed mitigation measures. In addition to Mass DEP's comments regarding the scope and content of the alternatives for work in the riverfront area in accordance with 310 CMR 10.584, we note the following for the commission's consideration. For 310 CMR 10.584 D1A, it is within the commission's discretion to require that vegetation within the first 100 feet of riverfront area be preserved or extended to the maximum extent feasible to approximate a 100-foot wide corridor. Per 310 CMR 1058 4D1C, it is within the commission's discretion to require a wildlife habitat evaluation in accordance with 310 CMR 10.60 for alterations within undeveloped riverfront area.
And that is underway. My understanding is you contracted that out to another.
We did.
We've added a lot of comments basically about staying outside the riverfront resource area. The commission has felt very strongly in all the cases of the solar in particular, that it's important to enforce those areas universally, and all those solars so far have stayed 200 feet from the river, from the mean annual high water. Okay.
That was the end of our notice of intent comments.
We added some additional comments, asking for evidence that battery materials enter the BBW because the battery areas and some of the other equipment are either in or very near bordering vegetated west. Since in this particular case, that's not a battery there, but if it were there, that would be a downhill flow to the bordering vegetated wetlands. So we want to make sure that if anything leaks, or in the case of a fire, the outside coverings are breached, that nothing will flow into the wetlands. We also asked them to describe any particular efforts to contain or limit noise produced by the plant for cooling the batteries, particularly as pertains to nearby wildlife areas, of which there are several, as we'll find out from the wildlife habitat evaluation, which isn't covering the whole property, but the parts that we felt were most critical along the riverfront and back in the forested area. We asked for a modification of the pad and containment for the transformer, such as the transformer fluids, even though now these days they're typically non-toxic, but they're very oily, that they'll not enter the BBW if the transformer should leak, which they do pretty regularly. And we noted that the horse track was not designed as an access road, but is compacted clay, and that adding gravel on makes it look like a road, but it's not. We'd like to point out to the planning board and ask them to reconsider whether this is adequate to support large trucks coming for the construction and those sorts of things. We recommended considering a riverfront redevelopment along the stream, the westernmost stream, which is the one that goes near the barn, because that area has been degraded, and it would be a perfect candidate for riverfront restoration. And in that process, you might consider taking out the track and putting in. That might be a little farther away. And we requested evaluation of this stream crossing structure where the driveway crosses the westernmost stream. It looks like a standard accepted stream crossing now, but it's been there a long time. And we'd like to have it evaluated for its ability to carry heavy trucks. It's not the shape of it so much as it is the strength of it. If it collapsed, it could cause serious flooding from backing up the banks because the banks don't have much reserve. Okay.
Do you want to spend some time
Yes,
discussing any of those before we switch gears?
yeah. Do you have any questions?
Could I please get a digital, could I get a digital copy of your comments?
Yes,
Thank you.
I'll send him when I get home tonight.
No.
Okay, does anybody here have a question? It's a lot of stuff we just went through. Basically, we're asking them to reconsider most of the crossings of the wetlands, the things that extend into the wetlands, or into the buffer areas. This this passage in particular, there were comments, there about the concrete blocks that are supposed to protect the two sides of that crossing
Up in here.
up in there. And, about the status of the play track. Anything else? Yes.
Darla, I have a colleague, 564 Glendale Road. What did you what did you say about the track?
What we said was that the clay track it was meant for horses. It's a compacted, track. With, as far as we can tell, not much underbed. And gravel is on top of it, so it looks like a road. And some of it is planned on being used as a road, and we felt that was, that wanted to especially direct the planning board's attention to the fact that it may not be capable of carrying, large trucks. Maybe there should be a road there, and some of it they're not going to use, so, they're planning on taking it out. And if that were to accompany a riverfront restoration of that river that runs along next to it, that would be a good idea. Anybody else?
I didn't see it in here, but are we gonna, I know it'll be probably later on, but wire parking along the riverfront section?
That isn't in here. Andrew's
Oh.
wondering if we're going to require, normally, as before a project gets started building, we ask them to put up permanent boundary markers around all of the wetlands. In this case, that would be a lot of boundary markers. There are wetlands. It's kind of like almost like a sea star or something. There are so many. But I do think after we've decided exactly where the panel is going to be and things, we can consider which we think are the most vulnerable areas.
Yeah.
And ask for them there. So that's coming.
The permanent markers are usually the cellar, it's a
Lolly column.
concrete in it, sits a couple feet off the ground as a permanent, non-movable marker. To say beyond this point is protected land.
So the idea is to keep trucks that are working in the area or a logger that might cut down some of the forest, that they know not to stack stuff in those areas, not to dump dirt in those areas, but to keep them protected.
It just may not be practical in this case, we don't know yet. Yes, ma'am.
Andy Howell, 535 Glendale Road. How much wetland is there where they want to build this, and how much is really permissible? I remember a time when wetlands were forbidden to do anything with. I knew people who couldn't even put a building on wetlands, and now this is a ton of wetlands. There's all kinds of brooks and springs through there. I know that property. How much is able to be done without disturbing everything and causing more water down the mountain?
It was delineated last year before they started.
But there's.
And generally speaking, they haven't gone into the wetlands. They've gone into the buffers. But there are places where they've gone into the no disturb zone. And as a good example, this, what would you call it, connector? There's a power line essentially that they're planning to run under the ground, and that's a BBW, that's
This
a
line right
bordering
here.
vegetated wetland that's surrounded by that green line. So one of the things we asked them to defend specifically is why that has to go underground, why it has to go there, why can't it go around, and that sort of thing. That's a lot of what these, please defend or please describe or please, basically what you're saying is, tell us why it has to be in one of these places that essentially intrudes on the buffers to the wetlands or on the wetlands. And then our job is to, and also the peer reviewers will look at all the material they turn back in to answer all those questions. And then we have to decide which things we're going to allow, which things we're not going to allow, or if there's no possible way to adjust it, that it can be allowed. Those are the decisions that we have.
Want to get started on stormwater? Okay. So my review pertained to stormwater management aspects of the project. Can everybody hear me okay? I'll turn a little bit more.
If you look, it says stormwater on the,
It's the February 28th letter. The reason why we can look at stormwater here is because the stormwater management standards are detailed under the 310 CMR 10 that Judy previously described as being, the all-encompassing regulation for wetlands in Massachusetts. So the first, 10 comments are going to be about the stormwater management standards themselves. And I know that we don't give detail in our letter, so I'll ad-lib a little bit about what they are. Standard 1 is regarding discharges to a buffer zone, to a regulatory area under the Wetlands Protection Act. It just means that we can't have untreated stormwater discharges that are erosive. So we're looking at, is there enough treatment of these discharges, and is it erosive when we look at actual calculations and numbers? And this standard was met based on the information we had.
And I will note, because there's been a lot of questions about it, when it talks about, what is the wording they use in there? Toxic,
Total suspended solids,
Total-
TSS.
all of the things that they can't be emitting into the wetlands. They don't include animal waste and nitrification. We have to deal with those in other ways. Because that was my first question, how come? But in fact, they specifically name the kind of industries that have dangerous output, and it doesn't fall under any of those.
Right. We can get into that in a little bit. Number 2, standard 2 is regarding making sure that the water that's coming off the site today and the water that's coming off the site in the future after development, after everything is stabilized, that in the future is less than the current, that the conditions are better under the proposed condition. We did note that as proposed right now, the standard is met, but through the rest of the comments, there are, likely changes that we're expecting with the stormwater management design that will alter those numbers. So we will be reevaluating all of these as we get revised information. Standard 3 is about groundwater recharge. So that's putting water back into the ground. That's now going to be running off because we've changed the ground cover. There's a few items in here that we would need additional information to require compliance. I'll just read standard 3. So we note the report, the stormwater management report states that the on-site test pits were performed in the locations of the proposed basins, and copies of the test pit logs were included in the stormwater report. The test pit logs were not included in the documentation reviewed by Ty and Bond. We recommend the applicant include the test pit logs with the stormwater report. We note the information provided in the plans indicates each basin is designed to provide the necessary 2-foot separation from groundwater. So that's the bottom of our basin to the groundwater elevation. It's a minimum of 2 feet. I'll paraphrase some of these. This gets into some real technical things where we're looking at how much impervious area we're using in some of our calculations to determine how much water has to be infiltrated. I think there was a little discrepancy there. We're asking for some clarification. And then letter C is about groundwater mounding. So when we put water back into the ground, it's going to alter what groundwater is doing under that basin. And so there's an evaluation we have to perform to look at what that mound looks like. We needed a little bit more information on that data that was obtained for those inputs in that model. Standard 4 is about water quality. This is making sure that the quality that in our stormwater management design, we are removing solids like suspended solids, which is like probably not sand, but the finer materials, some silting materials like that. We're also sometimes in some cases looking at nitrogen or phosphorus. But because of the way this project is defined, there aren't any surfaces that require water quality. Rooftops don't have dirty runoff. Generally, I'll say a little asterisk on that because there are some exceptions, but so anything coming off of an equipment pad, panels are not impervious in terms of water quality. Standard 5 looks at land uses that may generate more pollutant loading than typical development. This is not one of them per the definition in the standards. It's not applicable. Number 6, the project is not located within a critical area. The critical areas are very defined in the stormwater standards, what they can be. We've determined it's not in one of those areas. Standard 7's about redevelopment projects. This project is not a redevelopment.
Is a cold water fishery. It should fall under critical.
In the most recent reporting cycle. Okay, we can, I think we'll amend that on the fly right now. And so that the applicant can respond to that. Number 8 is regarding construction period impacts in terms of soil erosion and sedimentation. You know, the stormwater standards require a plan that identifies your erosion control measures, you know, where they are in the plans. Per the standards, we think that's met. In addition, you know, this project will require a stormwater pollution prevention plan, NIPD's coverage and all that. Standard 9 requires an operation and maintenance plan. That's to make sure that any stormwater features we have on site are properly inspected, maintained, and that documentation is kept, you know, in terms of inspection records and things like that. There was a couple pieces that were missing. I think it's usually a plan in the actual plan, the actual document of the O&M plan. We like to see an actual plan showing where all these elements are. Versus referring to some site plans that may disappear over time. And then number 10 was about the illicit discharge statement. We understand a draft has been submitted. We'd like the commission to see a final one before construction. We don't need to see it today, but it is something that you should provide or you should require prior to construction. So the next 3 comments, 11, 12, 13 are in response to reviewing the wetlands program policy 17-1, and that's the photovoltaic system solar array review. And there's some stormwater pieces in there that we'd like to review.
If anybody wants to see that, it's easily downloadable online. So like it's in 7 pages or something.
Yeah.
It's not particularly.
Yep. So in that document, they talk about how to site a solar project to benefit stormwater. And the first one was talking about the spacing between panels, you know, giving a panel enough room to have water infiltrate back into the grass versus just be underneath of the panels and be a little too dense. So we are looking for consideration of, you know, changing that layout. Number 12, the policy recommends that the project is graded to avoid or minimize channelized stormwater flow directly into wetland resource areas. The swales adjacent to the wetland crossing are graded such that channelized stormwater flow will flow directly into the wetland resource area. We recommend the applicant consider revising the design so that flow directed to the wetland is not channelized. That just asks that we're reintroducing a sheet flow condition versus a channelized condition at those locations. 13, the policy recommends that panel drip edges or the leading edge, the downhill edge of the panel, are no greater than 10 feet above the ground surface, but we understand because of this project being an agricultural use, which may require elevated leading edges, we recommend the applicant provide the proposed height of the leading edge of the panels, which I don't think we had on the plans. Number 14, starting at number 14 is when we just get into a whole bunch of real technical stuff with our analysis or with the analysis. The first one is regarding the stone, the riprap swales.
Where are those?
So they're on the side of the road. The one I know on is on C 2.0 particularly. And then there's a detail on 6.0, I think.
So 2.0.
Yes, please. So it's right in that top right-hand corner on the side of the road.
East side of the driveway.
Correct.
Sorry. Oh. Whoa. This is what you're referring to.
A little dot hatch, right there.
Yes, you see that little honeycomb patch along the side of the road? That's the swale. So that's what these next comments are about. So the detail on sheet 6.0 indicates a triangular swale, so the swale being, a V shape. But the contours are depicting a trapezoidal. And we just want to clarify which one it is. And then B, the grading of the swales is representative of the trapezoidal one that we mentioned, depression. But that is including the roadway. And this is a challenging comment to get across here. So it looks like to us, the bottom of this channel, as shown on the plans, the honeycomb hatch is the swale. It looks like that's just the bottom of the swale and that the swale actually is in part of the roadway. We like to see it completely separate from the roadway. We don't want to see the roadway eroding. We want the swale and any of the channelized flow in the actual design swale. So we'd like to see that topography changed a little bit to further define that the swale is separate from the roadway, that we're not getting flow.
So the idea would be if it filled up too much, it would go on.
It would be flowing along the road if it was full enough, so. We want it to be away from the road. So in all those words, that's what that really meant. For C, the swales are not equipped with outlet protection. That's kind of similar to the comment I had previously. That's looking to reintroduce sheet flow at the end of swales versus just having a flat out discharge. Is there any questions about that? Because that's where things get complicated and confusing.
These things that are where they're referring to point discharges or narrow discharges is something that they avoid a lot in these things, because the point is to spread it out and have it like it would be in a normal rain going across the ground as a sheet. It maximizes the probability that will be able to be absorbed. And in general, we're looking for all the water that comes to the property to stay on the property as much as possible so that it recharges the groundwater, and also so it doesn't carry off animal waste or nitrogen or any of those other things that is filtered back through the soil.
Moving on to number 15, again, really technical things. This was in regard to delineation of subwatersheds in the hydrologic model. We disagreed with the delineation. We think a portion of the flow from this area flows to a different point or a different watershed or offsite, rather than to the proposed basin as depicted on the watershed mapping. We recommend the applicant revise this drainage area to reflect the actual drainage patterns more closely. Number 16, we understand that the project does not propose any new impervious surfaces that generate TSS pollutants or require TSS treatment. That's total suspended solids again. However, infiltration basins are prone to clogging without proper pretreatment. We recommend the applicant consider including pretreatment for each infiltration basin to ensure infiltration capacity is preserved. And I'll state that's something that Mass DEP also commented on.
Yes, they were very anxious about siltation of those basins. And that the first thing that we see on a lot of projects is that a big storm happens, silts up, and then everything just keeps going.
And I think we can solve it with sediment forebays, traditional sediment forebays here. 17, the project proposes to utilize the interior array field areas for grazing sheep, cattle, and poultry. The curve numbers used for these areas are consistent with pasture in good condition. Based on the cover types outlined in TR 55, so that's the guidance that we use for hydrologic modeling. In order for this curve number to be used, the ground cover can be only lightly or occasionally grazed. We recommend the applicant revise the curve number used to reflect an area that is regularly grazed. So we expect that's going to be a bigger change to our hydrologic modeling that we'll have to re-review. 18, the total area of the existing drainage areas is 1.4 million square feet, and the total area of the proposed is 1.5 million square feet. The existing and proposed drainage sub-catchment figures would appear to account for the same area. We asked the applicant to clarify why the proposed drainage areas are greater than the existing or revise the model as we needed. 19, the report indicates the project proposes 3,400 square feet of concrete pads. However, the only impervious areas included in the HydroCAD is the modeling software we use, HydroCAD calculations, is for the existing 7,500 square foot barn. We recommend the applicant add the impervious area associated with the concrete pads into the HydroCAD analysis. Infiltration basin 1 is not labeled on sheet 2.3. We recommend the applicant label the basin so it can be differentiated from basins 2 and 3. Infiltration basin 2 is labeled as infiltration basin 3 and sheet C22. And then looking at the spillway elevations, which is where water may end up coming out of the basin in an emergency situation, clarifying that number plans to the design calculations and making sure that those jive. And then 22, we recommend the applicant clarify where the overflow stone swale referenced in the detail on sheet 6.0 is proposed to be used. And that was it. And again, this is, preliminary review. I expect we get responses to these revised drawings and calculations. Take another look, make sure that these are been addressed, and then see if there's anything new that's popped up.
And the things that we added we asked for more details on the other stream crossings. There's one in the center of the project, and whether that maybe should be a stream crossing rather than a culvert, as well as the one that we were just looking at before that's near the property line. I always get very nervous when there's huge trucks crossing a culvert because we've had so many collapses in town. I would rather see something that I know is going to stay there and not collapse in. Even if there's not a fast flowing stream now, given the kind of storms we've been having, we are certainly going to get a lot of runoff through this area. The high point of the whole property is in the northwest, and the low point is toward Eastbrook. So everything essentially wants to flow that way. And any flow that builds up where those roads are, will probably have to cross under them. So we want to make sure that that doesn't back up on us. We asked them about the clay horse track in terms of impervious surface. Any of it that's left, it's been there now and driven on for a while, and it acts pretty much as an impervious surface. I noticed the soil in that area is also not very pervious, so we'd like to rethink all of that. And we emphasized the necessity of keeping the runoff on the property because of the animal waste. Since Eastbrook in particular is a cold water stream, cold water fishery, and the intermittent streams are tributary, we want to make sure nothing gets into any of that water. And I have concerns about what happens where the animal pads are and those streams are essentially running through. They're not well indicated on the map, so they're kind of hard to see where they are. But I think we're going to want to double check that in the second round. And DEP had noticed the test pits as well that you mentioned. Does anybody else have anything they have had concerns about, wanted to add?
Covered the crossing, because I remember we had that issue at another location, so.
The crossings.
Yeah, the crossing.
Yes.
Hi, Gina Stabile, 219 Main Pine. A couple of questions. The Ty and Bond peer review for the NOI number 5, they talked about 100-foot wetland not being defined where the driveway is. Well, picture. Clarify the northern boundary of the BBW south of the existing driveway.
Right.
Okay, so does it make sense now, because driveway has to be widened to allow these trucks in to have that area, not just that area, but land itself, that particular parcel delineated for wetlands?
Yes. I think you asked for that, didn't you?
Me?
Did you ask?
Or if they're-
No, so
Where the BDW goes?
I request clarification of the northern boundary of that BBW because it's obscured in the drawing.
Yeah.
Because of the different line types and polygons. There was the,
Yeah, I was just curious, it was gonna be in that particular area or all the way down the driveway.
Yes.
Was it in that one area they were concerned about? It seems like there's wetlands all right there.
I'm trying to remember.
So the area where the 30615 is, right, there's a green line on the left and a green line on the right. There needs to be 2 more flags hung. And
On the,
Yeah.
on the lot where the house is?
on the lot where the house is to complete that line.
Okay, so. That's the only area Ty and Bond's concerned about, not the area where they're proposing to fire the storage water tank or anything like that.
nope.
Okay.
So Ty and Bond peer reviewed the ANRAD that was filed. So in that sense, the boundary as it's shown on the drawing here was confirmed as the wetland boundary.
Okay, okay, so that was one question I had.
Yeah, how about the north side of the driveway up there? Is that still, was that part covered in the ANRAD?
I would have to go back and revisit that.
There's no wetlands up there. It's all,
So
it's 20 feet higher than where the wetland is. But
But is the intent to close that wetland?
yes, we'll get that flag.
Okay.
Probably hang
That was
2
one
more
question
flags.
I had. The other question, I've had a couple questions, of course. Ty and Bond's comment number 9, which I know this is kind of technical, but the provide concrete and material washout area detail, including proposed protective measures. Where on the map was Ty and Bond talking about? Were they talking about the basins or were they talking about the transformer pads?
So clarification, anywhere there would be a concrete truck, there are going to be concrete trucks
Mhm.
presumably at this location. And there's no information, those trucks tend to get washed out on site.
Okay,
So we're asking that the locations that is intended to be managed,
okay.
be provided.
Okay, I was confused on that and I'm like, okay, that makes sense. Hold on, I have notes, I'm sorry. DEP's comment number 6 about thermal impact, what exactly is thermal impact to a BBW?
BBW is bordering vegetated wetlands. And remember, I was talking about how the soil is a certain kind of wet soil.
Yes.
And it has a certain kind of plants growing in it that require wetlands. So if you were to take away all the shade
Mhm.
from that area, it has a thermal impact of the sun
Okay,
getting to that soil, into those plants that could deteriorate the wetland or could damage the plants.
so is that a concern as well with Eastbrook? Because it's cold water fishery and it has to stay a certain temperature? Cutting the trees down in that corner?
I don't think they're within the 200-foot.
Well, from my understanding is all the runoff essentially goes into Eastbrook. That's what it said from the stormwater report that I can understand.
And that could be probably addressed when talking about the cold water fisheries aspect of Eastbrook, and complying with the stormwater standard 6.
Yeah,
We can talk about that then, because
Okay.
I would, off the top of my head, without having my book in front of me, although, yeah, tree removal may constitute temperature increase, which we couldn't do to a cold water fishery. I don't know if that's what's in the regulation today. I know what's in the proposed regulations. I know what's in the regulation today, though.
Okay, one final question. And I don't even know if this is conservation's jurisdiction or planning board. But I'm really thinking it needs to be a condition on this project that the property line somehow works across the entire 53 acres. And I say that because when the wetland delineation was done, there were over 160 flags taken off property that were on other people's abutting property. And in fact, one of the gentlemen who was involved in the wetland delineation was in my front yard. And I got nervous and went out to talk to the guy and he disappeared. So I think he crossed from 530 over Eastbrook, over multiple people's properties to my front yard. I think everybody needs to know where they stand, even if they spray paint the trees. 53 acres is a large piece of land. It's very easy to get lost. And I think it's something that either conservation or the planning board should consider as a condition. If that makes sense. That's all I gotta say. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think it's within our jurisdiction
Okay.
to require that, but we have asked for a meeting with the planning board just to bring up the things that make sure they know about the things we're concerned about that are not within our jurisdiction.
Okay.
Or where our jurisdiction varies. For instance, we can deal with noise that might disturb habitat.
Right. And
We can't deal with any other kind of noise. So we want to talk about that with them and how to split the,
I did.
The regulations.
When we had the planning board meeting, I did address that, the noise issue with.
yeah.
Okay,
And there are
thank you.
several areas like that. I will put it in my notes.
Okay, thank you.
Mike Cador, 240 Ames Road. As far as the wetland crossing goes, the amount of area that's going to be taken by that, does the DEP require a replication of wetlands on site to, so that there's no reduction in the wetlands?
Yes, right. Any intrusion into the wetlands themselves, the resource areas, not the buffer, has to be mitigated. And the strongly preferred mitigation is on-site or within the municipality. So they could fix something that's in another, say we have conservation land that has a problem in it or something like that, they could mitigate it that way. Or they can negotiate money, but usually they require it to be mitigation on site. I think there's enough degraded area in this property, like for instance, that river, that if they were to do a restoration project, that might count as some of their mitigation area.
Get that on the plan.
That would come way at the end.
Judy, so for wetland disturbance, we have a replication plan. We're replicating within 100 feet of where we're proposing. I think it's like a 69 square foot wetland disturbance, very minimal, right there where the two green lines kind of V in on each other at the driveway. So it's very minimal disturbance. It's more than 69 square feet.
Yes.
I think the original path was that. I don't have the number in front of me, but it is minimal, and we have a whole separate sheet before he drives to it. Probably 3 or 4. Keep going, right there. So detailing plantings, the area procedures that need to be followed during the restoration process, monitoring all those requirements that go along with reestablishing a new wetland area as required by DEP. What Judy was talking about was restoring riverfront zones, where we asked to do that in lieu for credit for disturbance of other areas. And that's something we would consider, if that's something the commission would like to see, to allow for placement of panels in the already disturbed zones, where like the interior track area where it's already a grassed area, where we're proposing panels. That's a prime area. We're not cutting any trees in the riverfront zone. So we do have some areas we could look at for restoration, which would be located for the main plan.
Along this area.
One more. Snow review one. There you go. So in that top left corner, so we have our new driveway that's going to be, we're proposing, that's in the riverfront zone, but to the left of that area, all the way up to the property line is currently fields and things of that nature. So that is an area that could be slated for riverfront restoration. And I believe a portion of that is within 0 to 100 feet from the high watermark of the delineated stream in that zone. We would also maybe consider looking at some restoration, in the area of the track. Our thought with the track and utilizing that area for an access driveway, that's solely for routine maintenance of the facility. So that's not a construction, we're not going to be utilizing heavy
It'll get
trucks.
used when you're installing those panels, there's
Well,
no,
the area will be driven on by equipment, so that area doesn't need to be graded. It doesn't need to be cleared. It doesn't need to have a lot of earthwork, like say the right side of the property where we have vegetation. You have to have logging, clearing, grading, installation of a stormwater basin. That area is solely installation of the racking tables for the most part.
that's still a lot of weight going on. I mean, what we're concerned about, because we're concerned with wetlands, is that as large trucks drive on that, it will get depressed. And then you've got a place where the water goes and starts to create erosion washout that becomes severe. We've watched it when in logging areas where they go up dirt roads and they go back and forth. Pretty soon, that's where most of the runoff comes from. And it can be really problematic. So I see that as a great concern.
All right, we can look at that area, or we can put restrictions during construction to not utilize that driveway. Like I said, the idea is that that driveway is for maintenance vehicles, pickup trucks. People are just going to kind of drive down there, do a loop. If they have to replace a panel, they drive down there, take the panel out of the truck, walk up the array, replace the panel, and be on their way. So it's for long-term maintenance facility. It's not for driving an excavator over. Like I said, that area, there's no grading, there's no.
I
site
understand
work
that you're saying
through
it's not
that.
for heavy equipment.
Yep.
But it will get used, it'll get used for trucks carrying sheep. It'll get used for, if a road is there, the road will get used for anything that people want to take there. I think to presume that it's only going to be light traffic is presuming a lot.
You don't know if the owner's going to do it.
I would also, we've discovered often that once we turn our attention away, things shift. And so you have to establish at the beginning that it's going to be good enough for all the uses. I would also say, since you brought attention to that top area where the river is up against your field area, that's one of the areas where we're very concerned about the fact that that does have a 200-foot resource area next to it, a riverfront resource area, and that whole field intrudes into it. And we would strongly encourage you to push that back. Those are the kind of river. We're not so much concerned about Eastbrook because Eastbrook is kind of away already. The one thing we're concerned about there is that there's a fence that intrudes into the riverfront resource area of Eastbrook. And DEP had concerns about blocking wildlife passage because riverfronts serve as a corridor. And that's specifically stated in the policies that that's to be considered a corridor. In the riverfront areas that we're most concerned about is this one in the westernmost stream, where a lot of things intrude onto that riverfront resource area. And we'd like you to consider as much backing off from that as you can possibly do.
We can look at that. A lot of that is, it's not degraded as a sense per the definition, it's not paved, but it is cleared. There are areas which are the vegetation is going to remain the same. So, we have done our best. We're trying to, I think we've kept all the disturbance outside the 100-foot zones. We have a clear 100-foot corridor, north and south, where there won't be any fencing. There is the existing driveway, which we just discussed, that we can look at doing something else, possibly in the interior of the site. But, from a project planning point of view, we'd like to utilize the existing natural fields for the installation of the arrays. There's no cutting, there's no clearing, there's no major earthwork.
However,
It's installing,
intrusion on BBW that wasn't previously permitted. Just because the prior owner did something they shouldn't have been doing, like mowing a BBW, doesn't excuse the current owner from allowing it to return to resource area. That's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to, when you get informed that it's BBW, you're supposed to back out of it and let it restore itself. So when you say these areas have been mowed or whatever, the farm hasn't been an active farm, and therefore those areas can't be considered active farming areas. They aren't land under agricultural use. I have a long description in the response to you about what it would take to do that. But any degradation that was caused by a former owner is inherited by the new owner. It's a very specific law. And in fact, when National Grid built down on Allen Street, they had to spend a whole year restoring a swamp that had been dug out by the prior owner and filled with all sorts of things, and replanting it. So we're not asking you to do any of that, but we're asking that you not take, as a matter of fact, BBW that was previously abused as okay.
no, I mean, this is riverfront zone we're talking about. We're not speaking of
Yeah.
any intrusions into we're not looking to do any BBW disturbance other than the minor amount required to gain access to that upland area where we have a subarray 1B. So the conversation is a BBW disturbance. It's
Well,
technically
it's
we're
essentially the same. If
within,
something was destroyed without a permit, then it's still.
Could I make my points, please? The discussion is disturbance within the riparian zone. That's where we're looking and discussing in those areas, specifically those existing field areas and north and south.
Do you ask a question? Would the commission ever entertain a compromise whereby we would remove sub-array B and the crossing as such? Therefore, not disturb, sorry, this entire array would no longer be, and we would remove that and the road and the crossing as a consideration for allowing some modules in that 100-foot area that Nick just described. Again, I don't need an answer right now, but is that something that you would consider as the commission, where I would remove all of that area and any clearing and the whole road, which would limit the disturbance for some consideration in only that 100-foot buffer by the track?
So just to clarify, on
Sorry.
the 100 to 200-foot riparian zone is where it's already cleared inside the track area.
Well, I certainly couldn't make that decision. That would have.
No, but
It was just asking if you would ever even consider it.
we do understand that the commission's looking for reduction in panels, right? So we understand that, and we can cut some panels out. There is a target number we need to make this project viable.
You're talking about take this out.
Yeah.
In order to allow here.
To allow up to a certain extent.
Yeah.
I mean, we need.
Allow more here if you take this out.
Correct.
Yes, sir,
And then-
that is correct.
I just want to make sure I understood. and they understood.
Thank you very much for clarifying.
And then we would look to keep the 100 to 200-foot
Right, because you're in the two.
zone.
In most places, we have disallowed it. in town.
Yeah.
Understood, sir.
So we would look
But
to
it is
keep that,
discussable.
yeah, we would look to keep.
That's not only ask.
200
Is it
foot.
something that you entertain? That's the only answer.
And then we would keep it in that 10% permittable area. So, the requirement of, for riverfront area disturbance, 10% of the total riverfront area. We're a little bit above that now.
Barn should be. I know, it's not your fault.
The barn's been there since the
I
50s.
understand.
So, I mean, where this whole area was a cleared farm, working farm, we can provide historic
It hasn't been for
information.
years.
But
That doesn't- that's, the regulations could care less what it was.
I understand, but the barn hasn't been constructed recently. So we understand that there is an opportunity to work with the commission and the town to reduce the scope. There is some ability from the project developer. We can only reduce it so much until it's not viable in the long term for the project, but there is an opportunity to reduce some areas, maybe eliminate that wetland crossing, provide some riverfront restoration. We'll have our wetland scientist, we could maybe do a plan for, like I said, look to really restore the area from the edge of the driveway to the property line. So this is the BDW line. All this green area is what we have defined from the survey as that's both fields. So we'll let that vegetate naturally and provide plantings, additional type of, do a full mitigation plan up along this area. And like I said, I can look at the driveway if this is a major concern for the commission, possibly route a drive. We need to get access to the bottom of the site here, so we can try and come up with another configuration and
We could
look
talk
to
to the
restore.
fire chief too and see if he'd
that.
move it more further north or so but
Yeah,
there's a variety of things that we would look into for the commission, absolutely.
Do you have any
So-
comments?
My comment for the commission is that any alternatives that are presented, reconfigurations, that there be kind of an apples to apples, an equivalent assessment of the resource area and buffer zone impact so that there's a clear quantitative assessment of each alternative relative to the interest of the act and the performance standards.
so where we are today versus, and then.
Right, so you have your
quantify-
proposed, right? You've got WPA Form 3 where you
Yep.
have your impacts and your proposed mitigation.
Yes,
Just a version of that for each of the alternatives if you
Okay.
present multiple alternatives
Mhm.
so that there's that quantitative versus just qualitative assessment presented.
sure, yeah, we could do that. Yep. But we want to work with the commission. We understand that this is a sensitive area. This first layout, we did our best to stay outside of resource areas as much as physically possible. We have one small crossing to gain access to upland area. Same thing with the small intrusion into the 25-foot no disturb zone. I mean, that's the only pathway to gain access to 10 acres of uplands. There's really no other accessible pathway. There's an existing cart road that kind of travels through that area, historic cart road. I think that's how the old farmers figured the best route to get to that back area was back when they created that cart road. But those are the major resource area infringements we're making as part of the local bylaw and the Wetlands Protection Act. Like I said, disturbance in the 100-foot riparian. We tried to keep everything within the 100 to 200 foot. And as far as panels go, just keep them in those already. They're not degraded areas, but they're not wooded habitat areas. They're open fields, which currently exist. So that was the overall thought and planning on how we got to this plan. But we can do some work to minimize the system or the system footprint to a certain degree to, hopefully address some concerns that have been raised this evening. The concerns from Ty and Bond are all very straightforward. And, we'd like to kind of move towards a layout that the commission is comfortable with seeing in addressing the comments. So we're going to do revised plans to address the written comments, the DEP comments, and the commission's comments. But we'd also like I said, we want to take this opportunity to discuss areas where we can work towards getting a final system layout that is amenable to the commission and where you guys would like to see the system footprint be.
As you know, we got more of these meetings. So,
Oh, no, we understand that.
and you're all gonna be back here.
Well, we only get 2 meetings from these 2 people without adding meeting, which costs funds. So
Got it.
that's up to worry, but
In this conversation.
Yep.
Because I know you're gonna bore right underneath everything there. Would it would you be able to lay it out where we could go up to those panels and over instead and not have to do that underground boring underneath the?
We will provide an alternative analysis where I don't do HDD and it is, there's a conduit along the road. I will absolutely provide that to the commission to.
So it's either, the option is the directional boring, as we show here, which yes, it does go under the wetland. The other option is just a traditionally dug trench, which we feel had a lot more disturbance. It's a longer run, and to get towards that pad down to the south. I mean, array 2 has to be connected to the main battery system where we get the power out of the project. It has to be connected. So yes, we can traditionally trench and put conduit.
Or background.
Or we could go above ground if the commission would rather see poles.
Do you have a comment on it?
So while HTD will not, if it goes according to plan, result in a direct impact during construction, avoidance would be, future avoidance, similar to the comment about alteration with, recurring maintenance and riverfront. It's the same sort of thing. So an alternative that explores not going under the wetland now or in the future, which would be a maintenance activity, is advisable as, part of the discussion. And I would suggest not knowing this area, I was not the one who did the ANRAD peer review. Though I think I was out here a long, long time ago, but aesthetics are not an interest of the act. So if overhead utilities alleviated concerns about current or proposed or future impacts, it's a discussion.
If it was overhead, where would you put it?
In close proximity to the road.
I'm sorry?
In close proximity to the road.
Within a few feet of the road, yeah, so they could be
Because
serviced.
Wouldn't you go to the same place we have the sub trench now?
Well, you're building the driveway anyway.
No.
Okay, because we already had an instance in town where the power company had to come in and take poles out because it got so difficult to try to maintain them.
My understanding is the town prefers the wires underground and only come above ground when absolutely necessary. So the idea is to keep everything underground up until the equipment pad, and from there, there'll be poles up the access road, sir, to Glendale Road.
Yeah, that's true. It's just that we don't know if we want it there.
You got it.
I mean, we don't really have any, as Melissa said, we don't have any say in the aesthetics of it. That comes to the planning board. Like what neighbors see or don't see and all that kind of stuff. But I think the maintenance issue of having something that runs under the wetlands is worth considering, because personally, I like things I don't have to look at. But if you are going to regularly end up, repairing that or replacing that, I've certainly watched on the grounds at Smith College where I was working, they dug up one of those 3 times before everything got right, because there were things they didn't think about when they put it in.
So to clarify, what's going under they're just pipes, 4-inch pipes
With
that
conduit.
they sleeve
Yeah,
wire through.
they pulled it up and put it in 8 inch.
So something like this is much less maintenance than overhead wiring, where you have storm damage and, it's
You
exposed.
do the pipe leaks.
Well, typically it's a wire.
Correct.
So it's a cable inside of it.
Yes.
The cable is waterproof, but to Judy's point, we'll make sure that we size the wire so what you saw did not happen. The conduit sizing is larger than you think and doesn't fit in the pipe. That does not surprise me.
Or, they make some new kind of array that takes less space or is more efficient, but it takes a bigger cable to get to it.
I
I've
guess,
seen that happen.
I guess what I was looking at is if you're gonna dig and have to make the roadway going up there, you run your conduit up. And then if you have to bore, you bore that shorter distance on the backside instead of shooting
Along.
right across the whole thing.
Absolutely possible.
So,
Because I've seen moles take off and go the wrong direction it shouldn't have. So that's a long distance, the mole underneath.
I mean, another thing to look at, which I've had on other projects I've done in the past, where it's designed and permitted, I think it's built 2 or 3 years later, where we actually end up shrinking the footprint because the panels have gotten so much better. Their output is much better. So right now, what are the panels putting out, Rory?
650 watts, I believe.
Before was 400. So I've done sites where we've reduced the disturbance by an acre or two for the system footprint because National Grid's only going to take so much power. So it doesn't make sense to increase that. So hopefully we come back to you guys if this gets approved and we're saying, oh yeah, we're going to be able to pull all these
10%
panels,
more off.
10% of the panels off. Because that's just extra costs that, we don't want to bear in the future because the number is the number that we're approved for.
The 4.9.
Correct, to send to the grid,
You
so.
know on that, they're working on that. Bigger poles, taller poles.
But that has happened in
We're
the
making
past.
so much juice in this town, we're gonna have to.
Personally, I'd be willing to entertain option 2, I guess, if you want to call it, so.
Can you
If they-
all hear what
Oh.
Andrew said?
Sorry, I would be interested in seeing option 2.
What was that?
We can hear about half of what they're saying up there.
Sorry.
Judy, if I could ask a question. Hi. John Matthews, North Hudson Road. And I'd like to ask if I could, Jean Christie, a question about, stormwater.
Please do.
Calculations. Basically, we talked about, impervious and impervious surfaces and sheet flow and channeling. Some of the question I have though is, how does the calculation work when the ground is frozen? Okay, and it's really, might be a pervious surface, but it's really impervious, and we get a high content of rain. How does that work? You can explain.
We don't model that.
Yeah.
It's, that's not something that's under the Massachusetts Stormwater Standards, something that they've ever really considered. It's definitely something that we look at when the question comes up. So it's a great question. What we could do, and I'm not asking for this, but you can, run that same model saying everything's impervious. Yeah, and see what happens. See what happens to your basins. See if they exceed their capacity. See if these swales work, if there's water flowing all over the place. It's an exercise you could do. We don't do it often. But it's a good question. It's a fact. It happens. Absolutely. Like, especially with these weird rain right now and.
I'm putting a letter together that will go planning. Okay. You'll see another big storm view from planning.
Okay.
Yeah, they usually do most of the stormwater since we only have control over those areas. But there is very palpable concern about, especially after the Plainville event, which I'm sure you've heard about, which was a massive overflow. But we've had other smaller things in the area where there've been outflows of stormwater that carried a lot of sediment, covered a meadow, and that sort of thing. And I think people are justifiably concerned about that.
How did you go?
Patricia Harrington, North Road. I don't know what your names are on YouTube, but I have a question. You said that there's a possibility that as the towns become more efficient, that you could give back some of the land if you were to put this proposition back to them. How many projects have you worked on for solar farms?
I've done 27 projects in the Commonwealth.
Projects have given back land from?
I'm sorry, I missed the last part of what you were saying.
How many projects have you actually been able to do that efficiency reduction?
Oh,
was talking about?
I can't give you a number, but I'd say about half the projects. Because it is a time period from when you received approval to when you actually constructed. So, and the technology is, we were 250 watt modules in 2012 and we are 600 now. So
And when did we start this? 3 years ago, maybe?
2 years ago.
Two years ago.
This is projected to be built in 25 and opened in 26.
Correct.
So there's a space in there.
So in half of those projects, you were able to give back land.
We were able-
When you do that and remove the solar panels, did you also jackhammer all those inches of cement that you put down to attach them to the ground? Did you do that?
If I understand you correctly, I just didn't install modules. The footprint was literally smaller than what was designed. Say, we also, there was a rooftop system where we didn't use the whole rooftop, say we used 80% of the rooftop. So
So
the perimeter area stayed the same.
The actual building.
Right.
It happened in the planning stage. So
What we're
say
doing right now.
say it got to the end of 24 and the project had been approved and they found more efficient panels, they would come back to planning board and they would say, we want to make it smaller.
Okay, but once it's in,
Stays.
how many have you gone back?
Can you describe how the panels are?
Well, just to clarify, we figure all that out before it gets installed. So once we, and once this is ready to be built, say in 2 years, Rory's company go out, price the panels, find, what supplies available. And if those panels are more efficient than the panels we spec during our design today, which is the best knowledge we have, we'll look at the site and we'll consider areas where we'll remove tables before they get put in. I mean, it's
Tell people in more detail what attaches the tables to the ground and what that looks like.
Certainly, it's a screw. Most of Massachusetts, again, there's bedrock, so I can't put a H-pile foundation. That's the most commonly used. So in the Commonwealth, we will be putting a screw into the ground. And the screw will maybe stick out 6 inches to a foot, upon which there will be a foundational attachment of a racking system. So it's a steel racking system upon which these modules will be mounted.
So you don't pour any concrete?
There's no,
You're putting a power screw.
I'm putting a 12-foot screw in the ground, and I am mounting the racking system to that screw.
So there's no concrete pouring.
In the ground.
Okay, so I'm just gauging that by the dump in town, where I've seen tons of stuff and everything attached to that.
Oh, that's, yeah, you can explain.
Those are concrete, almost like the concrete road barriers on the highway, but smaller. They would come in and they would just drop there. They float on top of the ground because of the cap over the old landfill. So that whole thing floats like it was on a big airbag. So those concrete things, if they took the panel off, they could just go in there with a truck and pick them up and walk away. They're not in the ground, they're sitting. Now,
But
they
that
pour
isn't
some
like this.
stone to level in low spots. You'll see the stone all over the place, but the big concrete piece just float.
Is there another question over there?
I'll be quick. Pat Coyne, 20 Southbridge Road, and I'm the chair of the planning board associated with this project. So I'll be looking for all the referrals that are coming our way from all sorts of people. Specifically, I was wondering if in the course of this review, for the abutters and the neighbors who are all sourcing their water through wells, is there a point in this process where there's some confirmation or validation that there's no impact from stormwater runoff or any other changes in the course of this project that could impact wells and the aquifer that sources the water?
Tough question. I don't think there is anything in the stormwater standards that would require looking at that. The intent is if the stormwater management standards are met, the water coming off the site is clean enough. But I understand that the commission has previously talked about animal waste being a concern. So while I don't have anything kind of to dig my heels into that prevents any of that. I don't know if the commission had any.
Is there, when they were talking about treating the ponds at Great Horse, they did a study where they looked at the underlying geology and determined that things put into the ponds were extremely unlikely to move into the residential wells nearby. Is there something equivalent to that we could have done?
If we could, I'm hesitant to go down too many holes here. Stormwater management basins will do that. If they infiltrate, they will be able to capture pathogens or bacteria and it would stay in the soil there. But a lot of the site does not run through a stormwater treatment system before any discharge to a wetland or anything. But again, I don't have that regulatory teeth to kind of enforce doing more. What kind of ponds were you talking about at Great Ford? Are they the
Great
detention
Ford
ponds? Or are they just actual, just real ponds?
Typical.
And they have
ponds on the golf
Golf course, okay.
treated
Yeah.
algae, and the concern was that it would, they're natural.
Yeah, and they don't, and because they usually develop some,
Yeah.
I'll create a biomap, for lack of the right word, at the bottom that prevent,
Well, what
microbes
we
eating.
decided was really that the way the rock formations are in the geology below, it wouldn't facilitate off flow from.
But they did put in some test wells though, that they do
Yeah, there
test.
are test wells at the edges to
They,
make
they
sure.
correct.
Not by the ponds, but they're on the Raymond Drive edge of
There's,
the property.
they're also to make sure the water doesn't, that they're
Get too
using on their
low.
lawns and things, doesn't
Right.
reduce the available water surrounding, but I don't think that's an issue here.
I don't think the
So
volume.
Right.
for clarification, what do these ponds accept water from? I'm not familiar with the area.
Stream,
It's a golf course,
they're fed by the stream.
They're fed by a little
Yeah.
stream.
Okay,
stream fed.
so it's a golf
And,
course.
Yeah.
But my question was really just about, is there a way within regulations that they can study the geology underneath to give us a clue about whether there's a problem with it flowing into?
I don't think it would be in conservation. Right. It could be in your regulations. If you have, language that talks about water supply protection, which I think you do. I know you do. We can look at that.
Thank you.
I have a question. Linda Morris, 41 Potash Hill Lane. The telephone poles that are going onto the street, which way are they going? Are they?
Is your power going?
There is an existing one-phase line that runs to the barn. Is that what you're referring to?
No, once it goes out.
She's worried about on the street, what they're gonna see.
On Glendale.
I'm glad that.
The existing poles that are on Glendale will be reconfigured to have 3 wires instead of 1. And
Going which way though?
going towards Monson Road, going
Towards
towards Wilbraham.
Wilbraham.
Towards Wilbraham.
Yeah, it'll be going north, I
It's
think.
going
Up the hill.
into Wilbraham.
And they are putting in taller poles just like they are all over town, right?
Yeah, they're 3-phase poles.
I can't specify what their poles are. I just don't have
Yeah.
that information yet.
I think Bonnie said the RDA for that came in today, which means it'll be at the March 20th meeting
Yeah.
that will get reviewed.
To ask just a question on this. Darla Ivacoli, that long green strip there,
At the top,
yes, just for everyone's knowledge. That was a long, narrow strip where they used to have the horses go down. And at the end of it, furthest north, they had kind of like a little stable where they kept the food, hay, I guess, whatever they eat. So that was just a very narrow strip. It was never mowed by the previous owners. The horses ate that. It was not nearly as wide as what it is today.
yeah, essentially, at this point, given the land under agricultural use rules, all of the land is just considered either degraded or, it's not considered agricultural. That's what I was trying to explain before. Just because there's a field there doesn't make that more fieldy than any other place on property. And I think that it's not unwise to pick the more degraded places to put the panels. It's just that they don't come under any agricultural exemptions or anything like that.
Currently.
Where is the power from that plant, that solar array going? What town is it going to?
It's going into the general grid, ma'am. It goes nowhere specific. It just flows into the wire.
So it goes into the general.
You could be using electricity from it at some point in time, but you wouldn't know it. No one would be able to tell you. It just, it's like river water. It just flows.
Yeah, if you're wondering about whether it would reduce your rates, it doesn't affect your electric rates at all. What it does do is they pay a fee to the town, essentially, a rent-like fee. That's called a pilot fee, payment in lieu of taxes. And from each of the other arrays in town, there is money that's partially regulated and partially negotiated between the town and the solar people about how much they will pay the town every month for having this array here and using the town's air, I guess, essentially.
How much tax?
So it doesn't help your electric bill, but it will help lower your taxes because it's money coming into the town.
Each month?
I don't think that's negotiated yet.
That's not negotiated, it's something between the applicant and assessors.
I think it's Board of Selectmen, yeah.
And it would come after they know exactly how many arrays they're gonna have and exactly how much power they think they're gonna be able to put out. So near the end of the process, they do
They'll come
that.
to the selectmen and the assessors and the owner will come to an agreement.
When you do our Facebook tour, is that public knowledge to the town? I mean, we have a lot of solar fields here now. I don't know how much.
You would have to go ask the assessors or the treasurer, one of them.
Yeah, how much the pilot is for each one?
It is, and they can tell you.
It is, okay.
Yeah, they
Public
could,
knowledge, and they can tell you, but you can't go find it on Facebook.
you could ask Dick Petullo.
Okay.
Joe Savili, I'm medical planner. I can answer that question. The top 10 taxpayers in the town of Hampden are utility companies.
Yeah.
The other one is Great Horse, and the other one is the nursing.
Yeah, the gas line going through town, all the high tension lines going through town, the substation on Allen Street, all the solar, they pay a lot of tax. They're the top 10 biggest taxpayers in town, other than the two you mentioned.
Every single pole, every foot of wire.
Yeah,
Everything.
all the poles in town, you collect money, whether you know it or not. They have to pay us.
But it would be interesting to hear that number. I'd like to know.
Yeah, you have to talk to the assessors or say.
Yeah, well, look, I think it's gotta be.
But it is your right to
Give us
know.
$5,000.
Your right to know. We just don't know.
Any other questions?
Hi, Gina again. Has there been any talk about all of this equipment and any talk of PFAS? Because I know that's a big issue with the wells in town and any runoff coming from this project. I don't even know if that's conservation or if that would be planning board. PFAS from the,
My understanding is that current solar panels are so sealed that even if they break, essentially nothing comes out because it's sealed within the glass. Literally has to be, when they want to recycle it, they have to crush it very, very fine to get the toxins out.
that's interesting because I saw a study recently that I think it was, I forget what the association was that did the study, but a lot of the panels actually show up on these sites already damaged. Pretty high percentage, and I can find that study and send it to you. But that's a concern because we're all on wells and it seems like more homes in town are being hooked up to the public water supply. So is that, seems like something we probably need to know going forward.
Want to speak to that?
No, ma'am.
I'm even getting you.
No.
Well, I think it's a serious concern, so I don't really think it's a laughing matter, but
No.
we'll get to it.
Do you have any standard thing that you do in your calculations about that sort of?
Not for PFAS.
One comment, Judy, if the panels were to be broken or cracked, then that would limit their function, and that's not the goal of it. So the idea that any of those panels are cracked is a little is not my understanding at all. Because again, a cracked module, there's little silicon wafers, there's 144 cells in a module. And so if that's cracked, then you're not going to be as efficient. You're not producing as much power. So they are very carefully handled, and there's a QA/QC process that goes on to make sure every module is checked.
And I will tell you, I am sure they would get changed out. I mean, I have solar on my barn. We call and they'll replace it, but they don't want. It reduces your efficiency, and the company doesn't want to lose efficiency.
All right, well, I'm gonna keep looking at researching that, so thank you.
Yes.
Leo Kaufman, just my ignorance, I've been told that these solar panels only last 25 years, is that correct?
They're insured for, I mean, they're guaranteed for different lengths, but it's anywhere from like 15 or 20 to like 35. Depends on the panel.
When all these thousands of panels in Hampton are obsolete.
So the module manufacturer, I submitted a spec sheet for the planning board. You'll see it's 0.5% a year. So in 25 years or 30 years, you're at 85%. So these modules, again, the degradation is at 0.5%. That's pretty common knowledge.
But they're gonna, at some point, they're gonna be obsolete, is my.
So you're wondering about the recycling?
Yeah, how do you get rid of them?
We will have a decommissioning agreement, sir, and a bond with the town whereby after the life of the system, 25, 30 years from now, everything gets removed. Companies come out, modules get recycled.
What do you do with them?
They'll be recycled. They'll be recycled.
That's what Pat had told me.
They're actually building special facilities for that. It takes it's gonna take special factories that are gonna do.
There's so many millions in the country.
There's a lot.
Yeah. What happens to them?
There, a lot of the minerals that are in them are very valuable. So it's worth it to them to get them back to the company and get them recycled so that they can regain some of the cost they put in them.
They can take the inner parts, but the outer, I heard, they can't do anything with that.
What's that?
The glass and, yeah.
Yeah, they actually crush the glass into tiny particles and pull out the earth minerals, for instance, that are very, like cobalt, that are really expensive and hard to find. But it is a concern, and it will come up in planning board, I presume. Yes?
Hi, Paul Stump at 505 Glendale. Had a question about the test pits.
Yes.
The results weren't presented to tie-in bond. One of the questions I have is, are there standards as to when these test pits are dug? Does that change seasonally, like a
Perk test, like
a perk test?
no, with the test pit, typically in Massachusetts, you're using a Massachusetts licensed soil evaluator, who is also the same kind of person that would do test pits for a septic system. And you learn in that course how to determine where groundwater is without groundwater even being there. It's by color, it's by texture,
Features.
redoxymorphic features. That's the word I was looking for. It's where there's concentrations and depletions, to be real technical. But we're able to determine where groundwater is outside of the high groundwater months of April, May. But I don't know.
Seasonality, I guess, when you apply for a permit for a perk test, you have a seasonal block.
That's a different regulation though.
It's a totally different regulation, and somehow you guys can do some magic. Start over.
Well, the fluctuation in groundwater, because we have so much iron in our soil, it will oxidize and essentially strip the iron out. So you're left with a really kind of dull gray, almost looking soil. And that's a sign that that's the zone where the high water table
gets to and
fluctuates and sits at during a period of biological activity. So that it's the same thing that dictates seasonal high groundwater in wetlands and influences the plant community there.
So it's a little different than when they dig a perk test. They core down and then they look at that core And they're really good at looking at the gradations and the colors and things to figure out what kind of soil that is, how much permeability it has, where the water's been, how much plants were growing there previously.
But you were never presented with any of those results.
I don't have them, no.
Yeah, we went over all of these things very, very quickly, but 80% of them ask for more information. They're asking for more tests, more calculations, more drawings, more everything.
Who performed those?
And that's some of it.
I'm sorry,
Who performed those tests? Diane Buck?
No, we did not.
they were monitored, they did the testing.
So for the record.
We didn't monitor.
We reviewed.
Test holes.
We would review the logs, the results.
You guys was at the.
No, I was not there.
So for the record, the test holes were dug. I apologize. I didn't make it into the report. I must have forgot to stick.
It happens.
Yep, in there. It should have been included. We have it. We will provide it to Ty and Bond in the revised report.
And there's a request for mapping where they were as well.
Yeah, we did them in the locations of the basins.
Yeah, okay.
But we did that September, October timeframe, just for, let you guys know, when we were out there and dug those test pits. High groundwater on the right side and at the basin, kind of in the wooded area. Good soils and, very low groundwater at that lower base. But all that will be presented in the findings, and I was the one who was out there with the property owner who dug the holes for me in those locations. And I am a licensed soil evaluator as well as a professional engineer.
But my understanding is that most of the soils on the southeast side are relatively impermeable. They're clays and that sort of thing, and most of the ones.
Well, they're not clays, but they have I would say they have more silt than your standard soil, so they're more silty. Clay is really a specific term where you don't have virtually any ability to infiltrate water. But there is high groundwater. Ledge isn't that far down in those areas, so ledge is kind of high within that side of the site where we dug. But it's all reflected in the logs, which I'll be submitting. So once again, I apologize that wasn't part of the initial report, but we do have the data and we'll provide that.
Can you estimate when you think you're going to have a response? Or can you do it within a month? Or do you want longer than that? We need to sign the continuation.
So before we get to that, just to kind of circle back on layout changes that the commission would like to see.
Got 5 minutes.
I would appreciate if we don't rush this part of it. I mean, we entertain questions, we're in the Wetlands Protection Act for a half hour. This is rather important to where we go from here. So I think the commission should give this some serious consideration and, providing some direction on where you would like to see the layout go. I know there was some comments made, but as a whole.
I think as a general statement, the commission has always looked to minimize intrusion into the riverfront first and into the resource areas, and secondarily into the buffer. And I would reinforce that just because there's a no disturb zone doesn't mean it's okay to disturb the buffers up to the no disturb zone. That's sometimes a misunderstanding. That's just kind of an absolute line where we feel it's impossible to prevent materials that are in that no disturb zone from getting into that stream. So as a general premise, I think that's what you should be looking at, to minimize, absolutely minimize anything that intrudes on the wetlands or intrudes into those riverfronts and no disturb zones. Those would be my highest priority. Tom? Andrew?
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole point of why we're doing this.
Right.
I'd also be interested in the alternate plan that you said about removing some panels from subarray, what was it, 1B?
Yes, sir.
and then transferring over to array one,
Not transferring, sir, we just,
just remove it?
we would just, again, instead of removing the panels that are currently shown inside the 100 to 200 foot buffer, we would leave those, sir, and remove all of,
Buffer.
sorry, I apologize.
I just have to correct it because it's really important buffers and resource areas.
I apologize, resource area, I apologize. I guess my question is, would the commission like to see one plan where I show that and one plan where we don't? Or is that too confusing?
Then look at how they can do something that's constructive on their end.
Yeah. What do you think?
Right, we have a lot to address,
Yeah, I know.
you know, and we're gonna make changes. I don't want to address, not make changes, right? Because part of this is reduce, you know, we understand we need to reduce some of the footprint here.
Okay.
We understand that. So that's why we're looking
That's what we can decide.
for guidance. No, we don't need a decision, but just, I mean, the general statement of keep everything out of the riverfront area, that is not practical to a certain degree. You know, we will need to have some riverfront disturbance in the 100 to 200 foot zone for siting panels in the fields.
Well, if that's the case, then we need a really strong defense of why that has to be so. That's what's in this. There's a request for a defense of all of the alternative versus what you have.
I mean, if we can't keep those panels, then we'll have to work towards subarray 1B. I mean, there's only so much we can give to not make this a viable
But that's what the
project.
regulation.
No, we understand that. We will present both options.
Yeah.
And we can do that. You know, one is tables, but then a already cleared grass field. You know, the other would be wetland disturbance, replication, and, you know, extending that gravel driveway through a certain area. So that's what I was asking, was looking for a preference. But we can do both and
Melissa, do you have any comments on that?
look towards the future.
Sure. So if it were things that I would be looking to evaluate in terms of additional alternatives would be avoidance of encroachment with on the 25 foot, avoidance or further minimization of direct impacts to BVW, avoidance of, you know, and or mitigation within riverfront area to, you know, there was discussion of, you know, allowing the area to naturalize. And I think you mentioned potentially, you know, installing supplemental native plantings to further enhance and boost the reestablishment of that corridor. Those are the things that reduce the numbers that get documented relative to the performance standards.
Mhm.
And resource area has performance standards, buffer zone is a buffer zone. So, you know, one is weighed slightly more heavily under the act.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other last minute questions
Did the DEP say anything about that?
about?
Because I'm assuming their driveways within that 200 foot buffer now. Did the DEP?
Yes,
did
they
that?
asked for a strong defense of the alternatives.
That's what I thought. But
They said, I think bluntly, the alternatives were insufficient. Okay, a time frame for the continuation.
Yeah, why not?
1 month, please.
1 month. Okay, so, yeah, I think it's easier if we keep it as a separate meeting
Sure.
so that we have more.
What's it, what, April?
I'm looking
That's
right now.
April 3rd, I think.
Yep,
April 3rd at 6 o'clock.
right.
Yeah.
That's 2
Can you
weeks.
do that?
I'm sure.
April
I'm sure I have enough time to plan to do that. Yes.
3rd.
Well, if not, we can go to our normal meeting, which is the 3rd,
We can make it work.
I
I
can.
didn't even look at my calendar. It's
which is very close, yes.
For
Right now,
April?
we have a lot.
Oh, no, that's too actually, but April.
Yeah,
I would give it, I would give it.
Yeah, this works
Special
better.
better.
I can do it.
That's fine with me.
Okay,
Andrew?
we'll do that now.
Yeah, I
We'll
mean,
if we
it's a
have-
month out. We'll find
So
out.
April, 3rd, thank you all for being so polite
Greg?
and
Greg?
So
Yeah,
I'll make
okay.
a,
good questions.
so do we gotta make a motion to?
Yeah.
Close the hearing.
Yeah, we have to vote on continuing.
Oh, I make a motion to continue it till April 3rd at 6 P M.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
There, yes.
So we're gonna need a signature on that.
Do we need to
If you
sign it?
wait a minute,
I will hang out.
I'll give you one.
Awesome. Do we need to sign it?
No,
Yeah.
it's just. yeah. So,
Just-
always forget
okay.
everybody.
I don't know. Everybody have to sign that?
Yeah.
Okay. Not a problem.
Yeah, there's two, one for Rory to take.
I wanted that in there.
Oh, my God.
But this application.